Today's reading is from Luke, and it's actually only one of two places that we read about the actual birth of Jesus. I found that actually quite surprising, given how the story has become so big, right, in our life, in our calendar, where maybe Christmas carols and Hallmark have probably embellished and romanticized the story. 3 ships, but I won't go there. Luke's story of Jesus' birth is a pretty rough, tough account, written to believers who felt as if they were on a path full of hardships, living in a Roman-dominated world affecting everything they did. Whether the opening verses are literally true of the Roman bureaucracy, issuing a command that every living person had to go back to where they were born to be counted for a census, it just highlights the extremes that this government was going to intimidate and make things tough for everyone. And of course, the places named here, Bethlehem, Judea, are all locations in what we now call the West Bank and Gaza, that are still tough and rough places, still bleeding with oppression. And into all of this comes a baby. Luke 2. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that a census be taken of all the inhabited earth. This was the first census taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria. And all the people were on their way to register for the census, each to his own city. Now Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the city of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and family of David, in order to register along with Mary, who was betrothed to him and was pregnant. While they were there, the time came for her to give birth. And she gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him in cloths and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn.
In his autobiography entitled The Last Jew of Treblinka, Heinrich Reichmann tells how he escaped a Nazi concentration camp in 1943. He was among several hundred prisoners who organized a revolt against the guards and then slipped through the barbed wire in the resulting fallout before the guards could regain their control. Reichmann had escaped, but he was by no means safe. He was in the middle of Nazi-occupied Poland, so he hid in the forest for as long as he could. But as he grew more desperate and starvation set in, he took the great risk of approaching a local farm to ask for food and for assistance. The farmer helped him, but instructed Reichmann to get to Warsaw as quickly as he could, as it would be safer there, safer being a relative term. It was simply far too dangerous for him to remain near the concentration camp in the aftermath of the revolt. Warsaw was more than 60 miles away on foot, but Henrik set out knowing it was his only chance. And while on his way, Henrik met a second farmer who fed him and gave him clothes. Then he met a third. This man asked him, "Are you a Jew?" And Reichmann was honest and said, yes, that he was. Reichmann then says, quote, "This Christian man who was walking in the opposite direction from where I came turned back and said to me, 'I'm taking you to my home.' His wife ordered me to take off my soiled shirt and gave me a clean one. Do you know what she said to me? 'This is my husband's only extra shirt. It is yours.' They gave me a healthy meal, allowed me to stay for 2 weeks, gaining strength. And from there, someone else gave him a ride. Another person gave him papers to pass through a security checkpoint. Someone gave him a temporary job. He was welcomed by another to sleep under a bed, in another to sleep in a barn, in a fallen down shack, in an abandoned building with others who had escaped or who were in hiding as well." And the story goes on and on and on like that for 2 years. No single person did anything heroic to save Reichmann, but collectively, through simple kindness, they succeeded in saving his life. Through dozens of different acts of compassion, he survived the war and his eventual descendants were given a future. His rescuers weren't especially brave. They were sometimes terrified. Still, they joined this long chain of events that were life-giving and life-saving, and all it took was a little bit deliberate goodwill. As the saying goes, in a world where you can be anything, be kind. Such kindness may, in fact, save someone else's world, or at least change the trajectory of that person's life. A person's entire story could be edited and rewritten because of just a little compassion. Thursday morning, I attended Cindy's preschool Christmas play. It was everything you might expect. Small children making up the nativity scene. There was the straw-filled manger and tiny angels and magi and baby doll Jesus with Mary and Joseph, animals from the stable, songs and music, a Christmas tree, decorations, jingling bells, and at the end, a special appearance by Santa Claus himself. It reminded me of the first play I was in. I was no older than these 4-year-olds that you see on stage. I was a shepherd boy at the Pleasant Valley Baptist Church. My sister was an angel. My father was a wise man, though his costume of having a beach towel tied around his head didn't seem all that wise to me at the time. But for my own part, it was hard to be critical. I was wearing flip-flops and a kitty bathrobe as a shepherd. I've watched, participated in, sang in, written the dialogue for, and directed many a Christmas cantata over the years. Mary, Joseph, angels, shepherds, magi, talking animals, they are all on the stage as sure as the reading of the Christmas story. Who is rarely, if ever there, is the Bethlehem innkeeper who turns the nativity couple away. He is usually ignored, or he finds himself in the annual pageant as the villain of the story. And no one wants to play the Christmas villain. Lump him in with Scrooge and the Grinch, the Bethlehem innkeeper. She gave birth to her firstborn son, wrapped him in swaddling clothes, Luke 2:7 says, and she laid him in a manger because there was no place for them in the inn. There it is. If there is an inn, there must be an innkeeper. And this cantankerous one apparently slammed the door of his franchised Wyndham Hotel right in the face of an 8-month, 3-week, 6.5-day pregnant Mary, sending her scurrying for safe haven somewhere else. And that haven traditionally has been a barn, what with the baby Jesus getting stuffed into a manger, an animal's feed trough upon his arrival in the world. And that just makes the innkeeper all the more villainous. Mary and her boy child, the mother of God and the King of the universe, treated like livestock. This is how you become the anti-hero. This is how you get written out of the story completely. But let's write him back in today. Because I don't think the innkeeper was a villain. I don't think he was malicious or necessarily hard-hearted. I think he was just busy. I think he didn't have the time. He didn't take the time to show a little kindness when kindness would have rewritten the entire story. His and the Christmas story at large. I've been a decades-long reader and lover of Frederick Buechner, a legendary novelist and devotional writer. He imagines a conversation that goes like this. That was a long time ago, said the innkeeper. And nobody has forgotten anything about my own sad, curious part in it all. But I do not blame posterity for making me out to be the dark villain of the piece, the heartless one who said, no room, no room. But if you want to speak the whole truth, then you will have to call me a villain with a catch in your voice, a hesitation. Because do you know what it's like to run an inn, to run a business, a family, to run anything in this world for that matter, even your own life. It is like being lost in a forest of 1,000,000 trees, and each tree is a thing that must be done. Is there fresh linen on the beds? Did the children put on their coats before they went out? Has the letter been written, the book read? Is there money enough left in the bank? Today we have food in our bellies and clothes on our backs, but what can we do to make sure that we will still have those tomorrow? 1,000,000 trees, 1,000,000 things to do. Buechner continues, of course I remember very well the evening that they arrived. I was working on my accounts. I looked up just in time to see the woman coming through the door. She walked in that slow, heavy-footed way that women have in the last months, as though they are walking in a dream or at the bottom of the sea. Her husband stood a little behind her, a tongue-tied, helpless kind of man, I thought. I cannot remember either of them saying anything, although I suppose some words must have passed, but it was mostly silence. The silence, the clumsy silence of the poor. And you know what I mean. It was clear what they wanted. And then it happened much in the way that you have read. I did not lie about there being no room left. There really was none, but perhaps if there had been a room, I might have lied anyway. As much for their sakes as for the sake of the inn. Their kind would have just been better off in a stable anyway. You know what I mean. So when the baby came, I was not around. I saw none of it. All your life long, you wait for your own true love to come. We all do. Our destiny, our joy, our heart's desire. So how am I to say it? When it came to me, I missed it. So pray for me. Pray for the innkeeper. How this story could have been so different. His legacy, had he taken just a little time to be receptive, compassionate, and kind. It would have changed his place in history. It would have changed the entire Christmas pageant script. We probably would have lost the barn animals. But we could have kept the angels and the shepherds and the magi, right? We would have lost the manger, the food trough. But the innkeeper would have become an icon. Kids far and wide would fist fight to be the innkeeper in the annual Christmas play. Because this kind concierge, this big-hearted and benevolent innkeeper would have been the first person in universal history to welcome Jesus into the world. Wow! And he missed it. So he is written off. He's not even given a name. I think Buechner's storytelling is exactly right. The innkeeper wasn't a bad person. He harbored no hatred in his heart. He wasn't mean. He was just busy. His head down, lost in a forest of 1,000,000 trees, and each tree a thing to do. I think that line could have been written for every one of us. And not just this time of year. Especially this time of year. When family and shopping and traveling and gatherings and end-of-year reporting all grow like pine thickets across our daily calendars. But we live like this much of the year and most of the time. When you have so much to do, when you have too much to do, it takes away the time and the vision you might otherwise have to actually see those who could benefit from a little kindness. Those who need to catch a break. Those whose story could be rewritten and in the process might even rewrite your story. Simply by being kind. It's a chain reaction. It's a chain event. You're kind to someone, and 9 times out of 10, they will be kind to someone. It may work a little bit like the old telephone game, but in a positive way, a blessed way. You might remember playing that in school. Sometimes we called it gossip. A teacher would whisper into the first kid's ear something like, "Find the rubber ducky." And that kid would turn to the next kid and whisper it into his ear, and he would whisper it into her ear, and on it would go for 20 or so kids. And when you got to the end, instead of, find the rubber ducky, it would be drive my father's truck. Because it's lost in translation as it goes. But wouldn't it be wonderful if kindness worked like that? That you place a little kindness into someone's life, and it gets passed on to the next person, then it gets passed to the next person, and by the time you get to the end, you end up with something marvelous, different, and wonderful than where it began. Because kindness finds a way of filling in all the cracks and giving people a chance to rewrite their story. I want to tell you a story this morning. And it's a story about this little guitar right here. It's a Cordoba nylon string guitar. And I went searching for one of these after my recent elbow surgery because it has much less string tension than an acoustic guitar or an electric guitar. It sounds different, but the short of it is, if you've had an injury like I have or surgery like I have, it's just easier on the hands and the elbows to play a nylon string guitar. And I was tired of not playing, so I wanted to get back to it as quick as I could. So I got online and started looking around for a good used guitar just like this one. Something not cheap, but something not expensive. And a lady in Pensacola, only known as Zig, had this guitar for sale, and it fit perfectly. I drove over Tuesday. It was actually closer to Perdido Key than Pensacola, and that made me a little angry. And so I was sort of grumbling at myself as I went. I don't have time for this. Why am I doing this? I was saying to myself, we had just gotten back from traveling to Chandler Davis's wedding out west. I was tired. I was super busy trying to catch up. 3 talks to give over the next few days with Christmas coming. Getting ready to tell all you people here today to slow down and be kind. But on to Zig's place I went. She met me at the door. And given the nature of her advertisement for the guitar and the state of her home, it was nearly empty of anything. I could tell that she was in transition. There were some life changes going on. I picked up the guitar. I looked at it. It was exactly as advertised, and the price was right. So I pulled the cash from my pocket to complete our transaction. And Zig looked at me with a little curiosity, and she asked me, "Are you buying this for yourself or as a gift?" And I explained that I was buying it for myself, the whole elbow thing. And then this question: are you that guy with the Serenity Prayer podcast? I felt my chin drop a little. I took a little step back toward the door because I had been thinking, who really goes by Zig if your last name isn't Marley? Right? And I said, that could be me. Then the most amazing thing happened. Zig said, "I've listened to that. It's meant a lot to me. I bought this guitar as a gift for someone and it didn't turn out. Maybe something good will come out of you having this guitar. So I'm going to give it to you." And I was stunned into silence. Me. Long talking, shit shooting me. Not a word. My jaw dropped open, and when I could finally speak, I said, "You can't do that. Here's the money, take it." But Zig persisted. No. I want it this way. Just every time you play this guitar, will you say a prayer for me and my family? And people, my red-blooded Baptist raisin came roaring back, and I took her by the hand and said, let's pray right now. Like I was at a prayer, like at a tent meeting or something. And so I prayed for Zig, for her family, for whatever she was up against. I didn't ask for the specifics, didn't need to know. And I said amen, and we both wiped the tears off our face, and to the truck I went with this new-to-me guitar that I now affectionately refer to as Zig. I didn't get home with that guitar money. I didn't blow it. At every red light I stopped at coming up through Pensacola, I handed out wads of cash to homeless people. People with "we'll work for food" signs. I called an old woman over from the bus stop and gave her $100 and said Merry Christmas and drove away laughing. I gave $50 to a kid at the gas station to fill up his ratty car because he looked like he could use it more than I could. And he looked at me about the same way I must have looked at Zig. I'm not the hero of this story. But how? How, when someone has been so kind to me, could I not reciprocate that? There was just something about getting a little grace shot into my veins that opened my eyes to see that a few others could use the same thing if I had it to give it to them. I don't know where Zig is headed into or away from, but I'm going to pray for her every time I pick up this guitar. And I'm going to pray that somehow her act of kindness will rewrite her story. I'm praying for those half dozen homeless people and the old woman at the bus stop and the kid at the gas station and the waitress at Sonny's Barbecue off 9th Avenue. Maybe they will keep it going, and somehow their stories will be edited and reworked because of a little unexpected kindness. I feel like my life was changed by kindness, by Zig. Why not theirs? Why not yours? Open your eyes and see. Take your eyes off those millions of trees and millions of things that you have to get done. They'll be waiting on you tomorrow, next year, and the next decade. But there might be somebody in front of you right now that if you see them, you need to be kind to them. Those who need only a word, a gesture of compassion, it can make all the difference in their lives.